Hi, I'm Dylan, and with Daniel, today we'll be exploring how the global issue of governmental abuse of power manifests across cultures and historical moments through the graphic novel Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi and the civil rights photography of Bill Hudson. Both of these works highlight the abuse of authority to control populations, whether through terror or force. Persepolis is a graphic novel written by Marjane Satrapi and first published in 2000. The novel chronicles Satrapi's early childhood, growing up in Iran before, during, and after the Iranian Revolution of 1979. During this period, Iran experienced massive political upheaval. The Shah, who represented Western influence, was overthrown and replaced by the Ayatollah Khomeini, who established a theocratic government based on strict Islamic principles. The new regime used fear and religious ideology to enforce conformity, severely restricting personal freedoms, especially for women and dissenters. Satrapi's Persepolis reveals the impact of this authoritarian regime on daily life, focusing on how terror was used as a tool to suppress individuality and enforce political and social compliance. The civil rights movement in the United States, which spanned the 1950s and 60s, was a response to centuries of racial segregation and oppression. Black Americans, along with white allies, engaged in nonviolent protests to demand equality and the end of Jim Crow laws, which enforced racial segregation in the southern states. Bill Hudson, a prominent white photographer working for the Associated Press, was a key figure in documenting the movement. His photographs captured some of the most important and violent confrontations between peaceful protesters and police. Hudson's work provides a stark visual contrast record of how American authorities use physical force such as fire hoses, attack dogs, and batons to maintain racial segregation and prevent change. While Persepolis focuses on the oppressive tactics of the Iranian regime, Hudson's photography focuses on the brutal enforcement of segregation in America. In both cases, governments use their authority to silence dissent, whether through religious doctrine or physical force. Both works demonstrate how government power, when unchecked, can become a tool of oppression, targeting those who challenge the status quo.
The common factor in Satrapi's Persepolis and Hudson's photography is how governments employ oppression, whether through religious regimes or racial segregation laws, to control and manipulate populations. This form of oppression transcends time and cultural boundaries. While both Persepolis and Bill Hudson's photos comment on governments using their authority to control populations, Persepolis focuses on governments' use of terror to enforce conformity, whilst the Bill Hudson photos focus on authoritative figures using force to maintain racial segregation. In Persepolis, Marjane Satrapi uses juxtaposition to underscore how terror is used by the Iranian government to enforce conformity. One particularly striking moment occurs when the peaceful, everyday scene of a family at home is shattered by the phone call informing them of Mohsen's death. This shift from peace to horror highlights the constant threat of terror under the regime. Satrapi uses juxtaposition here to show how no space, not even the home, is safe from government intrusion and influence. The juxtaposition of life and death in this scene emphasizes the oppressive, fear-based control the government exerts over its citizens. Later in the novel, Satrapi juxtaposes the escape of CMX's family with the murder of Mohsen. The family, disguised among sheep, visually represent the conformity the government forces upon its people. The sheep metaphor conveys how citizens are made to follow blindly, fearing for their lives. Satrapi's use of juxtaposition between those who escape and those who succumb to the regime's terror draws a stark contrast between life and death under theocracy, showing how fear is used to enforce conformity. Bill Hudson's photography focuses on the physical force used to maintain racial segregation. In his iconic photo of the 1963 Birmingham protests, fire hoses are turned on peaceful demonstrators, illustrating the government's willingness to use brutal violence to enforce racial hierarchy. The stark contrast between calm nonviolent protests and aggressive police tactics mirror the violence used to preserve segregation. Hudson's framing and use of leading lines in the water direct the viewer's attention to the inhumane treatment of the demonstrators, making the state's oppression undeniable. Later in Persepolis, Satrapi highlights the story of Nilufar, a young communist revolutionary executed by the Iranian regime. In this scene of the movie, Satrapi uses graphic weight to emphasize the stars on Nelufar's clothing. These stars represent her uniqueness, a symbol of her individuality and defiance against the government's expectations of conformity. The stars coming Nilufar visually set her apart from the faceless black and white clothes previously used by everyone in the novel. By focusing on these stars, Satrapi signals that Nilufar's refusal to conform made her a threat under the eyes of the regime. Her execution demonstrates how the Iranian government is not just afraid of dissent, but of individuality itself. The killing of Nilufar represents the government's fear of uniqueness and different ideas, as her very existence defied the homogenized and controlled society they sought to create.
In another powerful image, we see a state trooper beating a civil rights protester. Hudson's use of perspective emphasizes the protester's vulnerability by positioning the trooper above, symbolizing the unequal power dynamic between oppressors and who they seek to control. This brutality is magnified by the oppressive stance of the trooper who looms over the protester. The facelessness of the protester, blurred by the violence, strips away their identity, much like how the government dehumanized Black Americans to enforce racial segregation. While both artists capture the theme of oppression, their perspectives are shaped by their unique backgrounds. Satrapi writes as an Iranian woman who personally experienced the horror of an oppressive regime, which adds emotional depth to her work. Her graphic novel critiques not only the government, but also societal expectations of women. Conversely, Hudson, as a white American photographer, was a witness to the struggles of Black Americans. His work exposes the harsh realities of racial segregation despite not experiencing them firsthand. Both artists use their respective mediums to bring attention to oppressive governments, but their approaches are shaped by their differing roles in society. Though set in different places, one in the Middle East and the other in America, both Persepolis and Hudson's photographs show a common global issue: governments abusing power to control their populations. Whether through terror or physical force, oppressive regimes aim to dominate, silence, and enforce conformity. These works remind us of the ongoing struggle against tyranny no matter the time or location.